Are you looking for a way to make co-parenting easier? Talking Parents can help you streamline your shared parenting responsibilities and minimize conflict by keeping all interactions organized and documented. With Talking Parents, you can stop worrying about the he said, she said, and focus on what matters most, your children. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store and start a 30-day free trial today. Welcome back. Today we're talking about behind the courtroom curtain, tales and tips from a seasoned divorce lawyer. And I'd like to introduce you to my guest of the day, Larry Bloom. Hi, Larry.
Hi, how are you?
I am so good, and I'm so excited about today's episode. Larry has a book that recently came out called Blame Bloom, so we're going to get into that a little bit. But divorce, as you folks know, can manifest in countless ways, ranging from peaceful and mutual to that hostile, never-ending high conflict. And Larry has experienced all of it. And so the other thing is he practiced family law for over 40 years. So back in the day, actually, when I got divorced, couples had to prove cause. And so we're going to talk to Larry a little bit about a no-fault state versus a fault state where you have to prove cause. And the other thing that I just want to share about Larry as we get started, I always like to share something that people don't necessarily know. Of course, those who read your book, Larry, will know it, but you got divorced, and that had a big impact on your practice. I remember you telling me that many, many years ago.
Changed my whole practice.
Yeah. And so we're going to get into that a little bit too, and what that means when a matrimonial attorney, a family law attorney, actually has experienced what you're going through, the listener. So Larry, I would love to dive in and just start with, I think it's always fascinating to hear why an individual chooses to work in the divorce field. So why family law? Why divorce?
The short answer, because I mattered. Now, I told the story in my book about my entire background, how I became a lawyer, and why I didn't want to be a lawyer in the first place, and then wound up choosing law for something unrelated to family. But my first job as a lawyer was working as legs of a lawyer who was in his 80s. So you can imagine he would be about 125 today if he was still alive. And anything out of the office I did. I went to jail to interview clients. I went to court. I did depositions. I did real estate closing. I did corporate, minor corporate law. I wrote wills. And the only thing that really was interesting to me was the divorce work. You could go, I did personal injury law as well. That was horrible. That was like going to school and learning science.
So what was it about divorce law that really caught your interest?
Well, number one, the law was changing. It was 1980. So that was when the equitable distribution law took effect. Before 1980, New York was a title state, and I can go through all of that.
Yeah, so, I don't think we're going to get too into the legal weeds today. I think I want to hear your stories, and I want to...
But being young was not a disadvantage. And I had a number of divorce clients, and the thing about them was, you would talk to them. If it was a low-pressure case, you talk to them once or twice a week. If it was a high-pressure case, you talk to them 5 or 6 times a day, every day. So, I mattered to them. I cared about what their problem was. They needed help immediately. They needed to be reassured. Now, I will tell you that over the course of time, I learned that you have to be a lawyer and not be a therapist. As I told clients later on, I'm not trained for this, and the therapist costs half as much an hour as I do. You're better off going to a therapist. But you got all of the information and you heard everything.
Yeah.
So to me, that was why I did it. It was interesting. I was truthfully bored in the other areas of the law.
Beautiful. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, because of your history, is that, I don't know how many states are still default states where you have to show cause, but I started my divorce in the early 2000s, maybe 2002. And so we stood before a judge, and my ex at that time, he said, she has no cause. She has to come home and stay married to me. Which sounds so strange to people these days. Can you share a little bit about what that was like when you had to show cause and the impact of getting rid of that had on divorce law in New York?
Let me tell you what I think is the law. I think New York was the 50th state to go no fault. So I think all the states have some version of no fault now. It's not California's irreconcilable differences. It's called an irretrievable breakdown of the marital relationship, which is exactly the same thing.
Right.
So back in the day, and you're talking, I think it was 2010 that New York got the no fault. So I practiced for a good 30 years where a good lawyer would put in his arsenal a contest the divorce option. And I had a guy who wasn't living with his wife, didn't care whether he was married or not, but he didn't want to give half of his UN pension, which was a very nice pension, to his wife. So we had a trial. She couldn't prove, they hadn't been together for 5 years, so they couldn't prove cruelty. They had to prove abandonment. And part of even constructive abandonment, which is no sex for a year or more, you have to ask. So our position was, she didn't ask. We were ready to do it. They weren't living together. We were ready. And, and we won on those grounds. 10 years later, she came back. She didn't want part of his pension. She just wanted her freedom. We said, okay.
Right.
I think she had a different one. Another case, I had a guy who crossed the Berlin Wall as a teenager. Married, so he had this German personality, very stern, very stoic. And you can imagine he crossed the wall. He married this lovely woman. And I would say the other son, lovely woman, 2 teenage daughters. Did not want to give his wife a divorce or give up his kids. So we had a trial on the issues of the divorce and child custody. We were supposed to have it on everything, but at one point, the real issue was the divorce and the child custody. She alleged cruelty and she alleged constructive abandonment. And part of the cruelty in New York, when to prove cruelty, the longer you were married, the more cruel you had to be. So if you did something and you were in a marriage of 2 years, that might be sufficient to get you a divorce. But if the marriage were 20 years and you did those same things, no, that's not enough for a divorce.
Really?
Yeah. So we alleged that the stuff that we didn't do the things you said we did. But even if we did, it's not enough for a divorce. And the constructive abandonment, she said, you haven't had sex with me in 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, our defense was, we haven't had sex with you in 10 years, but we're impotent. So in the trial, with an Irish Catholic judge, I brought in, without any expert testimony, I brought in any neighbor that the wife told as a declaration against interest on the hearsay, an exception to the hearsay rule, was we could get in saying he couldn't get it up for 10 years. So we won on the constructive abandonment grounds, which we lost the whole thing, but we
wait a second. So I just want you to know that all of my listeners are utterly appalled right now. And so I know you're a nice guy. And, personally, it's kind of like disgusting that a person has to stay married because her husband's impotent. So can you please balance what you just said with the positive impact not having to show cause has had on divorce law?
Okay. Let me tell you that I'm speaking as a lawyer with an arsenal, okay? And that arsenal existed, and you use that arsenal for leverage to get a better settlement. So when we lost on the divorce and we lost on the custody, and we should have lost on the custody because she was so wonderful. I'm telling you, she was wonderful. He was banging us. We were able to work out a better financial settlement.
Because her cause wasn't good enough.
Right.
Yeah. And honestly, I remember, I think it was 2006. It was toward the end of my divorce. And my ex stood up and said, I used constructive abandonment. I wanted to use abuse or whatever it would be, but I didn't want to do that to him. I didn't want that to be like on legal record. So I said constructive abandonment. He stood up and he's like, I'm ready to have sex anytime.
Okay. No, I understand that. But yes, being married to someone you don't want to be married to is the worst thing in the world. I say that from personal experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
But speak to the fact that the bottom line was, I mean, New York, which is such a progressive state, we were one of the last, but it created just such another level of heartache and struggle for so many, where the judge would say, yeah, you don't have grounds.
It didn't happen that often.
It didn't.
It really didn't happen that often. It was something to be used, and every judge would say to you, do you really want to try these grounds? Do you really want to keep these people together? And again,
it was a leverage thing.
It was another war story. I'm a brand new lawyer. My boss sends me to the appellate division because he had tried a case. Husband sued wife for divorce, wife sued, counter sued for husband for divorce. A pox on both your houses, the judge said. Neither one of you are getting a divorce. Both sides appeal. And there was a conference before a wise old judge who looked at my client, who was the man, looked at his second wife, looked back at my client, and it said the words that I will remember for the rest of my life. Mister, how much are you willing to pay to get rid of this cancer? Case settled in 15 minutes.
Wow.
15 minutes. So if you have a good judge, you'll get it done. But a lot of judges aren't good, and we'll get to
we're going to get to that in a minute.
We'll get to the subject of judges in a little while. But whether the truth is that a litigant shouldn't have to buy a divorce by giving up something else. And that's really why the no faults have gone into effect.
Okay. Let's pivot for a minute. One of the things that I've seen over my 14 years doing this is that, especially in high conflict cases, angry, frustrated, dysregulated clients can really take all of that emotion and toss it at the matrimonial attorneys. And so can you talk a little bit about your experience where you're just getting the full onslaught of your client's emotions, even though it's more of
have I been yelled at by my clients?
Have you never been yelled at by a client?
Oh, I got yelled at by my clients all the time.
Yeah.
Because part of my job is a lawyer wears two hats. A lawyer is an advocate. You do what your client wants you to do. And your client, and you're also an advisor to your client. You tell them what is reasonable, what a judge might do.
That's when you get yelled at.
Well, that's the old joke of, you go to a doctor, you want a guarantee from the doctor. You go to a divorce lawyer, you want to guarantee as the results from your divorce lawyer. And I would say, I can give you 3 guarantees. You find a lawyer who charges more than me. You can find a lawyer who charges less than me. And if you really want, I can handle your divorce in such a way that I guarantee you'll never reconcile. So, those are the guarantees in life. But yes, clients don't want to hear what they don't want to hear. They want, a man saying, why shouldn't I have custody? Or a woman saying, why shouldn't I have custody? Just doesn't work. Doesn't work out. So you have to tell them, the facts of life. I had a client, I represented a movie star going to court. They said, you have to be in court at 9:30, be on time, and wear a suit. And wear a suit. That's all I said. Two things. Be on time and wear a suit. He goes, why do I have to wear a suit? And this guy was a movie star. He was then doing a TV show where he was playing a prosecuting lawyer. And I said what I thought was the funniest thing I've ever said to a client, went completely over his head. You're not a lawyer, but you play one on TV. P.S. His baby mama, because it was not a divorce case, it was a custody case involving a child born out of wedlock. Baby mama was a TV star who went on later to win an Academy Award. Okay, so we're dealing, she comes in an hour and a half late. She's wearing an old gray sweatsuit with no makeup, hair tied behind back. She looked like she was going out for a run. My client, who never had anything nice to say to me, looks at me and he goes, now I know why you told me to wear a suit. So
Appearances.
yeah, you have to tell people what they don't like sometimes. Another guy, again, on fashion, one of the issues was how much money he was blowing at the casinos. He comes to court, he's wearing a silver satin shiny jacket emblazoned with the name of a casino on the back. I go, take that thing off and fold it inside out. He didn't want that, but
right.
So, you have to, number one, you have to educate them. Later on, we have to educate judges. Sometimes you have to educate other lawyers, but you have to let your client know what's smart and what's really stupid.
Right. And folks offline, I was asking Larry what were the messages he wanted to relay to you, the listener. And one of them, and so I'm just going to ask you to speak on that now, is the importance of humor, that while divorce is not fun, with the right perspective, you can chuckle at times throughout it. Can you just share a little bit? Because most people feel like they're scraping themselves, hemorrhaging on the emergency room floor here. And you're saying, be lighthearted. So elaborate a little on that.
Let me just start by saying, look at you. Look at the smile on your face. Look at me. Look at the smile on my face. We've been through divorce. We've not from each other, but we've been through divorce, 2 divorces, and we have come out thriving.
Yeah.
Part of the reason you're unhappy, and because you think that there are things that'll never get better, is because you've been beaten down in your marriage. Sometimes physically, most times emotionally, and things are, I could tell you stories about why my marriage ended, and it would floor you. And that was the difference between draft 3 and draft 4 of my book. I had to take out all the derogatory things I said to my ex, because my kids were going to read the book.
Yes.
Well, you do that. There are funny things that happen. And you have to be ready to smile. You have to be ready to laugh. And you have to be ready to say, okay, I can get through the garbage now.
Yeah.
I can get through the garbage just a little longer.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell something, and your listeners and viewers will be shocked. I represented a man after his divorce was over. His wife, every time he got a job promotion, his wife would take him back to court for more money. I represented the man from Valentine's Day 1990 to the end of 2009.
Oh my.
Already divorced when I started with him in 1990. But his divorce lasted, I'm going to say, 5 times longer than his marriage did.
Would you, in a case like that, the first thought that comes to me is legal abuse.
There is legal abuse, but again, if circumstances warrant, and support is always modifiable. You have to remember that. It's modifiable. So my guy kept...
Child support is modifiable.
So is maintenance.
Really?
In certain circumstances, yes.
I didn't know that.
Okay, yes. Certain circumstances, maintenance is modifiable. And for the people out of New York, we call that maintenance and alimony, the exact same.
Right.
So yes, it's modifiable. And in the beginning, In 1990, he still had little kids. So we had the issue of child support that was modifiable. And every time he got a promotion, he became a CEO of a European subsidiary of Merck. It was big,
Big.
big money he was making. And then plus it was Europe, so he got more money so that he could pay taxes in Europe and pay taxes in America. So we had to bring in experts on that, and we've had a
You
lot.
kept going back to court, like you had to actually
He
have.
never went back to court. She brought him back to court. We never. You know what? It's one of those stories where the man left his wife for a secretary, and the wife wasn't happy about that and never forgot it, and kept bringing him back and bringing him back and bringing him back. And is it abuse? Yes, it is abuse. No question about it. It is abuse of the system. And she went through, this was a New Jersey case. So she went through every big name in the New Jersey divorce bar. It was very funny. They were all, and they would got to the point where in 2009, before we settled the case, we were at a settlement conference, and the woman says, women in my family live to 105. So I want to support to 110. And when she said that, I looked at my client. I said, I think it's time for us to leave now. We walked out of the meeting.
That's crazy.
Eventually, we gave her a big payment to get on with the rest of her life, with the understanding that she could never do anything. And if she did do something, she was going to forfeit the money that we gave her.
Beautiful. So that was a nice solution. Okay, we're going to take a brief break. And when we get back, I want you to tell the story about the client that you were afraid of and that you told them to get new representation.
I'd be happy to.
Your kids may not be the only ones taking tests this year. SoberLink is the #1 alcohol monitoring device on the market for parents who need to prove their sobriety. Here's how it works. Your co-parent will test at scheduled times each day. Built-in facial recognition confirms their identity. Tamper sensors flag any attempts to cheat. And results get sent instantly to your phone. So you know your kids are with a sober parent, whether it's during school nights or weekends away. Set your family up for success this school year. Visit soberlink.com/JBD to learn more and get $50 off your device. Are you looking for a way to make co-parenting easier? Talking Parents can help you streamline your shared parenting responsibilities and minimize conflict by keeping all interactions organized and documented. With Talking Parents, you can stop worrying about the he said, she said, and focus on what matters most, your children. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store and start a 30-day free trial today. Divorce feels like an overwhelming perfect storm as you navigate pain, fear, and confusion while struggling with unfamiliar legal procedures and the pressure to make complex decisions that will impact the rest of your life. Our free Rapid Relief Call provides the clarity and confidence you're yearning for. Visit rapidreliefcall.com for support and guidance today. Okay, so very interesting in the book. Someone that actually really frightened you over the course of time. Can you tell us that story?
Okay. Well, first of all, let me tell you that I have represented people who were connected in some way to organized crime. Several people. Either they were noted mobsters or they were in the carding industry, which is basically the same thing. But I represented a man who was in the vending machine business. Now, getting a permit to carry a gun in New York and New Jersey is a big deal. You need to prove that you're walking around with large amounts of cash and things like that. And I've had people that say, can you get me a carry permit? I said, I could try, but I'm telling you, you're not going to get it.
Okay.
And they haven't gotten it because one was my dentist, and I do for my dentist, I do anything he asks me to do, but I can only try. I can't do the guarantee. I represent this guy in the vending machine business, carried a lot of money around. And he had a carry permit. usually what happens when a client comes to see you, you talk, they say, okay, I have to think about it, and then they'll schedule another appointment or they won't. But rarely do they hire you the same day they come to see you. This guy hired me the day he saw me. It was the only day I ever saw him where he was not high on crack.
Oh, wow.
He was a crackhead. And when he was high, he was aggressive. And it got to the point where it was a little bit too much. As an example, normally there's something called a four-way meeting where wife, husband, and their respective lawyers, hence four people, get together and they try to settle and come up with a resolution of the issues. Well, we do what was to be a four-way in his case at the wife's lawyer's office. Wife walks in with three lawyers. And I made a big deal about saying, look, if you think you're going to expand my client's legal fee obligation, that's not going to go. I'm telling you right now, don't even try it. But I knew they were there because she was scared out of her mind. She thought he was going to jump across the table, and I wasn't so sure he wasn't.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden he would, after the meetings, or at the end of a meeting with me alone, he would start to yell and scream at me, and he would get red in the face. And I genuinely feared for my own safety.
Wow.
And to the point where I said, look, I'm not a little guy. You've met me, so you know this you can't really tell. But back in the day, while I was still married, I was approaching 300 pounds, and I'm 6'4".
Yeah, I remember you being
I'm a big boy.
Big
I'm
man.
a big boy. I tend not to get afraid of things like, but this guy was a little guy, but he was out of his mind. I had to say to him, look, I think that you need to hire another lawyer. I don't think I'm the right person for you. But I paid you, blah, 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 blah. I said, look, I'm going to tell the judge, if you force me to make a motion to be relieved as your lawyer, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to say exactly why I'm afraid and have to get off the case. Do you want the judge who's hearing your case to hear all these things about you? Of course he didn't. He hired another lawyer.
Beautiful. Wow. Let's pivot to your personal story for a minute.
Wow.
I remember, what year did your divorce start in?
My divorce started in 2009. In the beginning of, I ran away from home on February 1st, 2009. I got divorced in April of 2011.
So you and I started divorce coaching in 2010. So I know I met you fairly early on, and we did a couple of your podcasts together. And at some point, I guess we became familiar enough with each other where you shared with me that your divorce was complete or you were getting toward the end. And I remember you saying, Karen, after all of these years as a divorce attorney, this really opened my eyes. Can you tell our listeners, because I think it's so important, like, not that you want to go and look for an attorney who's had their own divorce, but there's actually something about that. Can you share the impact you going through the divorce process had on your representing of your clients? That's what I'm really interested in.
Okay, it's funny because while I was interviewing you, I was doing the show every week. I was reading books, and I found this psychiatrist, and he had wrote a book on child custody. Before each show, I would meet in the green room. The green room was the bagel store across the street from where I recorded my show. And I would talk to my guest and tell them what I wanted to know, what they wanted me to get out of them. And I finished with this gentleman, and he asked me about my life. He goes, so finally he says, I write a blog for Psychology Today. I would like you to write a guest blog.
Okay.
3 days later, 3 days later, I had a draft of my blog entitled How My Divorce Made Me a Better Divorce Lawyer.
Beautiful.
And what it is, look, sometimes we lawyers have a tendency, you want to fight? Fine, we'll fight. But the example that I always give is why spend $5,000 litigating over a television set that's worth $1,000? Just buy a new one, buy a better one, and save yourself some money. And after my divorce, I said, well, really during my divorce, I said, you're spending money on nonsense. Don't waste your money. Move on to the important things. You want to fight about your kids? Sure, fight about your kids. You want to fight about, I don't know, a piece of artwork that's worth $1 million? Sure, fight about that. But the little things, the minutia of life, you got to get past. Let her have it. When I moved out of my house, I took my personal clothing, some furniture that was my brother's that had been in my garage, and I asked for permission to take a television set that we weren't using anymore. And that was all I took. And I started from scratch.
Right.
And it was the smartest thing I ever did in my life. Not fighting about nonsense.
Right. What about the emotional toll? There's so much, obviously, that's the waters I swim in, supporting people through the emotions as well as the logistics. But for you, so many matrimonial attorneys, it's your 9 to 5, it's the business of divorce. But once you're neck deep in the emotions of should I stay, should I go? Okay, I'm going to go. I have to tell my spouse, I have to tell my kids. How did that piece impact how you represented clients after that?
Well, again, the hardest thing about my divorce was when I told my dad I was getting divorced.
Your dad?
When I told my dad, my mom had already passed, and my brother had already passed after his bad divorce, which we could get to or not get to. But I knew that my father was going to put things together and realize that maybe this was the beginning of the end for me, like my brother's divorce was the beginning of the end for my brother.
Oh, okay.
And so in passing goes, how long have you been unhappy? And I didn't think about it. I just answered. And I said, 15 years. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I've been unhappy 15 years. And the argument I'm making to myself, because you have your own little internal conflict, again, if you're left or if you are leaving. I was the one who was leaving. I had this conflict. Do I want to leave my children and be a part-time father? Or do I want to see my children every single day, which is what I chose for those 15 years. And I had a plan. My plan was when my son became, my youngest child was a son, when he became a senior in high school, I was going to get divorced. I made it until his sophomore year. And then I couldn't take it anymore. It was, not because she was so terrible, but because we fought in different ways. That used to be my favorite dating question. When you meet somebody, you go out, you go, well, how do you fight? I would say. And they would say, what? I go, well, are you going to give me the silent treatment if we have an argument? You're going to yell and scream at me? Are you going to hit me? What are you going to do? And if somebody said they would give me the silent treatment, I wouldn't go out with them again. That was a deal breaker.
Fascinating dating.
That was a deal breaker.
That's an interesting dating question. I'll have to keep that in my back pocket. How do you fight? So was there anything, so I'm hearing like so you went through it, like all of us go through it.
Sure.
Did it have an impact on how you, or even your heart, your emotional understanding of your clients, anything? Was there anything about your divorce that impacted your practice?
Well, I think it did. I think I was always fond of telling people that I had the best job in the world for somebody in a bad marriage. I got my hostilities out in work. I was able to argue for the things that I really, for other people that I couldn't argue for myself. So
they should have been.
It was very weird because I knew everybody in the industry. So I get divorced. My wife hires a woman. I know the lawyer. The lawyer I had selected didn't know this person. So I said, well, I have a good relationship with this lawyer, so let me talk to her. You be my ghost lawyer. And we would, every time I would see her in court, they would be, hi, how are you? What's new? And she would say the exact same thing every time. Your wife doesn't want to be divorced. Not she doesn't want to divorce me. She doesn't want to be divorced. So one day she had a moment where I don't know, she must have had some sort of a breakdown. Both kids, my daughter came back from college to take care of my son who was in high school, who was upset. The same day, she fired her lawyer and hired another lawyer that I knew. So I called my lawyer, said, I don't like this lawyer. This is what I want you to do. Go do it. Start the act, FedExing a check, start the action tomorrow. So that was an impact.
Okay. We're going to start wrapping up here.
So soon?
I think that we can't talk about your entire book. We have to leave some things for people to read. I would like to, this will be my last question before I invite you to give some tips to our listeners. I want to talk about the judges, and I'm just going to set the stage here. My understanding from speaking to some matrimonial attorneys who have pretty much the same history as you is that when people are appointed judges, they go through the various courts, criminal court, civil court, matrimonial court, and that often matrimonial court is a starting place, and that once they finally get their feet under them and they understand how it works and they're helpful, they're kind of like shifted to another court. So I've heard that. It kind of fits with my narrative that, boy, isn't court pretty messed up. But can you give us your behind the scenes understanding of judges being human, but also that piece of how knowledgeable, skilled are they even in making these decisions that are going to impact families' lives?
Some are bad and some are good. There is a judge in New York. He was a practicing matrimonial judge. He always wanted to be a judge. He was a practicing matrimonial attorney before he was a judge. Always wanted to sit in the bench. And he became a judge, and he said, I want to be in the matrimonials. So all the other judges were thrilled because it's much more work. Most judges don't want to be matrimonial judges because the workload is so hard. Emotions are so hard. It's not as easygoing as some of the other parts. Even the criminal part is not as bad as the matrimonial part for the judges. They have so much work to do, and there's so much emotion. And while some judges might conduct their court without a court officer in the room, no matrimonial judge would ever have a case with the litigants present without the guy with the gun in them.
So you would actually say that, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that matrimonial law is more work and actually more dangerous for the judge in terms of wanting to have a court officer than even criminal court.
I think so.
Wow.
I think criminal court, they know that they have to be on their best behavior. In matrimonial court, they're so emotional, they don't even think about that. There's no question about behavior and non-behavior.
That's a very good point.
React the way they react. Now, there are lots of different judges, and most of them don't want to do matrimonial. They don't. The guy that was doing it, that I know and love, okay, wanted to be the judge. He's the needle in the haystack. Judges, look, you go into family court on a typical day in family court in New York, there are 40 cases on the count. So what's each case going to get? 5 minutes? And if you have a trial, maybe you'll have a trial for an hour, and then the judge will have to do something else. And then you won't get your second day of trial until a month or two after that. Trying a case in family court is the worst.
I have a client 10 years in with a 13 and 14-year-old, and every time her trial is scheduled for years now, it's an hour or two here, another 3 months, an hour or two there. It just feels like the most ludicrous, and it's so hard on the whole family.
Well, that's the way it was before COVID. And then when COVID started, nobody physically walked into the courthouse. It was so slow. was so slow. But you get judges, most judges view it as a punishment to go to the matrimonial court. They don't want to be there.
Yeah. And so the impact of that, if you could just, the truth is these judges, for those who have to go before the court and have the judges make decisions, which is, I know, a very small percentage, but you're dealing with a judge who doesn't want to be there, who doesn't have any psychological background for
Right.
all of the emotions and disorders and dysregulation going on. What have you seen the impact of good judges versus bad judges being?
It's not just good judges versus bad judges. There's smart judges versus judges who are not as well informed.
Okay.
Sometimes you get the judge who says, it's my courtroom. I'm doing what I want. I don't care what the law is, but essentially giving you that opinion. Then you get the judges who don't know anything and want to be educated. They're the best. Because then you could mold them. You could mold them to the thinking the way you want them to think.
Mm-hmm.
A judge who practiced matrimonial law is also a great judge because the nonsense stops.
Right.
You go forward and you deal with the issues that are on hand.
Gotcha.
So, but even in on a motion day in Supreme Court, I've seen 20 cases on the calendar one day. And when I'm so old that I remember in matrimony, they had something called matrimonial in Manhattan, matrimonial special part 5. And one judge would have on the calendar every matrimonial and would either divvy them up or decide the calendar. There were 100 cases on the calendar in the morning. And they go through it and you knew that nothing was going to happen. But even some of the good judges, they're quirky. There was a judge in Brooklyn, right when I started. And I'm giving it away by saying it's a she, but I'm not going to tell you her name. And whoever yelled the loudest in a courtroom won.
Oh, my.
Whatever lawyer yelled the loudest won. And usually she was the loudest one.
Okay, so I'm going to end on a positive note here. And so I would like you to share whatever your high-level tips are for our listeners, and then I'd like you to tell them a little bit about your book, and then we'll wrap up. And of course, in the show notes is a link where you can actually get Larry's book, which again is called Blame Bloom, Diary of a Divorce Lawyer. So what are your tips for our listeners?
Okay. The tip number 1 is figure out what you want. You need to go forward with a goal in sight. So you have to, first of all, you have to find a lawyer that suits you. I always explain to people, women get it better than men. If you're picking a lawyer is like buying a pair of shoes. You have to try a few on and see what's the most comfortable. As an example, I had a woman come in to see me. She had a great case. She worked for the Bar Association. And she was fired because she took time off during her pregnancy because her husband punched her in the belly. So she had a case against her husband. And what she didn't realize was that she had a case against the Bar Association. And she didn't like me for a number of reasons. One, I didn't wear a yarmulke. She wanted to North Blacks. That's right. And I said to her, I got the perfect lawyer for you. She's Orthodox. She lives in the same county you live in. And she's 4 months pregnant. She's perfect for you. But because I referred her, she never made the call. It was silly. She should have done it. What you want to do is you want to find somebody you're comfortable with. You want to find somebody who is knowledgeable. I always say going to a general lawyer and not going to a divorce specialist or someone who concentrates in divorce law is silly. Because then the lawyer has to learn.
Absolutely.
You want your lawyer to know what's going on, he or she.
So you want to know what you want, know what your non-negotiables are, what you want. You want to definitely hire a matrimonial attorney, and you want to talk to a few so that you're actually getting a sense of how you feel about individuals rather than just picking the first one you speak to.
Right. And what you also want to do is you want to make sure that your lawyer cares about you rather than him or herself. I've heard so many lawyers say, I like to try cases. Oh, does that drive me crazy? Because the lawyer only cares about themselves. They don't care about their client when they say it. Nobody should ever have to try a divorce case. Have we done it? Yes, I've done a lot. I've gone, and whenever you go, there's a trial, there's a winner and there's a loser, which means there's usually an appeal. So you're quintupling your 20 times more in legal fees than a simple divorce.
Yeah.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't fight about a TV.
Right.
I'm just looking at do you want to try and negotiate it out? Do you want to litigate immediately? Do you want to engage a collaborative lawyer? And I don't know if you're.
Yep, we don't have to go into that. They've
Okay,
been
good.
well educated.
Okay. Is that what you do? And truthfully, every lawyer negotiates. I was a contested matrimonial lawyer because I felt that the way you got your best settlement was with the leverage of a trial and the leverage of litigation. Okay?
Okay, give us one more and then we're going to go to your book and wrap up.
Okay, do you need to go to court right away? Do you need to make a motion to court to have support being paid? Do you need to protect assets from being removed from the jurisdiction? Do you have to protect your kids? Are you being beaten? Those are a variety of things. And believe me, it's not just women who you ask that question to. You ask the exact same question to men.
Absolutely.
Because the abuse is the exact same way.
Yep.
So what you want to do is you have to figure out all the other things. The insurance. There's a rule that you can't stop health insurance or any kind of insurance during the pendency of the case. But how are you going to get that going on? Security for you settle the case. How are you going to make sure that either the paying spouse doesn't go bankrupt or die? Those things. And as an example, my divorce, they said, well, what about life insurance? Now, mind you, I was 295 pounds. I couldn't get life insurance. And I had made a mistake while I was switching policies, it lapsed. So I said, told my lawyer to sit down. And I said, this is easy. You know, the half of my retirement you're not getting, the one that I actually get to keep, I'll guarantee my payments to you with that other half of that money. Move on to the next subject. So.
Being flexible and creative. Yes,
but creativity is key. That judge who I said, the one who yelled the loudest, one day I make an argument, and I worked for this guy named Myra, and she says, Mr. Bloom, is this one an Irish stick? And I went, no, Your Honor, it's one of my own. Okay, you got to be creative. And like I said, I have a sense of humor, and I know that not everybody wants a sense of humor. One of the beauties of doing this and of writing the book was that I'm not looking for business. I'm not looking to take on new clients. I don't want new clients. I'm very fortunate. I still have two friends left who they should be retired, but they're not. And they call me for advice, and I can jump back in. I ask the same question to them that I always ask, which is, what side am I on? Am I thinking like a wife? Am I thinking like a husband?
Your book is so chock full with stories, which I love, Larry. And you also you cover so many different things in here. Can you just tell our listeners where the name of the book again, and where they can find it? And it's also listed in the show notes.
Okay. The name of the book is Blaine Bloom, Diary of a Divorce Lawyer. My name is Lawrence H. Bloom, Lawrence with W, Bloom, B-L-O-O-M. Let me just tell you a brief little story. The book, for a long time, I thought I should write a book because all these war stories jumped out. It flew out of me. It took me 2 years to write, but they flew out of me. And the working title of the book was Diary of a Divorce Lawyer. But as I was practicing law, I found that a lot of lawyers were challenging me personally. And I would always say, Your Honor, it's the old adage, if you don't have the facts, argue the law. And if you don't have the law, argue the lawyer. And this woman is arguing the lawyer. And I said it so often that I got bored. And when you're bored, it's not as good. I said, that's right, Your Honor. Forget that she's not letting him see the kids. Forget that he's not paying her a dime. It's so much easier to just blame Bloom. And that became my mantra, and it eventually became the title
Oh, I love that.
the book.
So, Larry, you're entertaining. You clearly have so much experience. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sharing your tips. Folks, it's a great book. If you're interested in that big picture look at all of the different things, the shenanigans and the behind the scenes that goes on, Larry's book is an easy and great read. Blame Bloom, Diary of a Divorce Lawyer. Pick it up
on Amazon.
on Amazon.
Available on Amazon. It's available other places too, but truth is that most people have Prime
go to
and
Amazon.
don't want to have to pay for shipping. So
They'll go to Amazon. Larry, thank you so much for your time.
thank you for having me. This has been fun. It's great to get back together and talk to you again after all this time.
Absolutely. And we'll be back again with another episode real soon. You folks have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.